Hello, my name is Kevin. I am a First Nations advocate with Dementia Australia. For more than 50,000 years we have come together to trade knowledge, to learn and to teach. Today we join to keep up that tradition. So with that in mind, we now pay our respects to the traditional owners, to elders past and present, to those First Nations people joining us here today.
All day, they don't come and get us to move.
So I just want to welcome you, everybody, for being here today and coming to this group. You know, it's really, really important space for all of us, and it's one that Emery and myself feel really privileged to be part of.
What you're listening into right now is a peer support group. It's for carers of people living with dementia.
So just as a way of starting, if we could just go around the circle, just share your name, who it is that you're looking after, if you would like to share.
Now, this group meets every fortnight. They share stories, they give each other advice, and importantly, they listen.
Word to share how you're feeling today, and then maybe one thing that supports you with your own self-care.
Groups like this one are invaluable for carers because the emotional toll of caring for someone living with dementia can be huge. And sometimes you just need to talk to people who've been in your shoes before.
I'm Julie, and my husband Stuart has frontotemporal dementia with aphasia and behaviour, but he's been in care for 8.5 years almost. And
whether it's professional counselling, calling up that one friend who truly gets you, or joining a peer group like this one, it's so important to have as many self-care tools as you can.
I'm grateful to be here. It's just lovely to have support.
Hello there, I'm Hamish McDonald, and I cared for my dad after his diagnosis with Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's.
And I'm Jim Rogers, and I'm living with younger onset Alzheimer's.
This is Hold the Moment, a podcast made by people living with dementia and their families.
Haim, how did it feel when you were caring for your dad? Did you feel burnout?
I absolutely felt burnt out. I was ruined by the whole thing at times. It was really hard. I think Dad was never a straightforward person in the first place and was always incredibly strong-willed and determined, and that never changed even with his diagnosis. So,
I wondered where you got it from.
But it often meant that you were kind of trying to find this delicate balance of listening to him and his needs and supporting him in what he wanted, whilst also being super conscious about what was safe for him, what was available to him in terms of options. It was just a really difficult balance. And everyone that knew him and saw him and interacted with him heard from him on those things. And so you're often fielding this kind of ecosystem of opinions and ideas and thoughts and suggestions. And sometimes it was just really, really hard to get it right. So I sometimes came away from the whole experience thinking I could just never quite get it right. You know, he was never happy with whatever it was we were doing, even though, you know, I think that we went a long way to try and meet his needs and give him a good standard of care.
I think you did. From our chats, like, you always considered his feelings, what he would have liked. I think you were very consistent in what you did.
It was just a sort of delicate balance, though, because what he wanted was not always safe or achievable. You know, he always wanted to go...
Or realistic.
Yeah, like he still, you know, as his Parkinson's and Lewy body advanced, he was still wanting to go on holidays on his own to Queensland. And so trying to have that conversation with him and find a compromise that would work, maybe going with a carer or a family member or something like that, was just really challenging because he didn't want it. And so sometimes you just had to say no because it wasn't safe. And you know, frankly, he got pretty pissed off about stuff like that and would tell people he's being held against his will and he'd been taken captive and his human rights had been taken away by his family. So those kind of conversations, when it was fed back to you, could be quite distressing because we were working really hard to try and give him a good quality of life. So did I feel burned out? Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I swore, not really
Well, you
at
swear
him.
all the time.
But you get to a point where you're like, oh boy,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do
Exhausting.
here. So Jim, you had a great chat with Vicki about the feelings of being physically and mentally overwhelmed that can come with caring. Tell us a bit about her.
Vicki cared for her husband Michael. He was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's when he was 60. She was a single mum. She raised her kids and they were entering adulthood when she and Michael met. As it is for most carers, it was an extremely trying time, but for Vicki, the challenges started even before Michael's diagnosis.
I'd been a single mum for 12 years and Michael and I met at work. We worked at the same place together in local government. So we kind of had that in common and we just kind of struck up this conversation, and then I thought, oh, he's a pretty nice guy. And he was single and on his own. And we just started. I don't know how we actually went out on our first date. I do remember the date though. We went to a very cheap Polish restaurant because of my Polish background. And he said that was far too cheap. I need to take you out again, and I need to
Do a proper job.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how it went.
So how are you feeling about your future with Michael when you first got married?
Oh, look, I was obviously overjoyed, and having been a single mum, and we got married on the beach in Broome. Had a lot to look forward to. He didn't have children. He was an only child. So my girls were in, they're, I think, 12 and 17 at the time. So at a good age where it worked for us, and had a lot to look forward to, really. And we had some really good years together. We went on holiday to Vietnam. That was a fabulous time that we had together, a good adventure. After doing those hard yards, and just nice to have someone to share the evenings with, have a drink together, socialise together. And we had between us good friends and all of those sort of things. It was good.
What were these first signs that you noticed about Michael when you started to, some of these cognitive difficulties that he was experiencing? What were they?
Well, Michael is a good cook, and he loved his signature dish was vegetable stir fry, and he would chop the vegetables. I've never seen anyone chop vegetables like he does. And he would be wanting to get like soy sauce or something from the pantry or fridge, and he'd go there to get it, and he'd say, where is the soy sauce, or where is this? I'd go, that's odd, it's right in front of him. And then it would be things like leaving the keys behind, glasses in restaurants. He would be working really long hours, and I mean from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 at night. I noticed when he was on the computer and trying to organise it, he was organising a trip to base camp with friends, and he'd get lost opening up all the windows, and he couldn't navigate, the computer where he was going on things and landing on things, and getting very confused. So I started to think, there's something going on, and I couldn't pinpoint it. And I have to say, dementia wasn't on my radar.
No.
That didn't even come into consideration. I was actually thinking more sinister, like, could it be a brain tumour? I mean, what is this? But then I did the Google thing, and the more I Googled, I started to think it's definitely a cognitive issue, and it's starting to look a lot like dementia.
Did you start talking to him about this? And what happened when you tried to talk to him?
Well, I did talk to Michael about it, and, clearly very sensitive matter, but I raised it with him. And it was interesting because at the time I was working for Headspace, the youth mental health. I'd set up the operations centre at Joondalup. So, I had a pretty good idea of, mental health issues and what to expect and dealing with that sort of thing. So incredible sensitivity around it. But Michael was in absolute denial. He's the guy who played football and, sporting prowess and physical prowess and that whole male thing. It was like, how dare I even question.
So he's a fairly fit guy.
Oh, absolutely, and no health issues, really fit and healthy. And And it was really interesting as well, because when I wasn't getting very far with Michael, then how and where do I get support? I don't have family. My siblings live elsewhere and my parents died when I was very young, so pretty much on my own with this. And then with Michael being an only child and his mum, and, that had to be really sensitive as well. A mother's only son might look like dementia. So who and where do I go for support? So I reached out to a couple of very close friends and confided in them. I couldn't believe the response was almost, how dare you? Like, I felt like I was being the monster, and it was disparaging. So they were absolutely...
That would have been confronting.
Yeah, not on board with that.
Had they known him a long time?
Of course, 30-odd years. I'd only known him 3. Like, what would I know?
Yeah.
So
that would have been very hard.
Absolutely. So I actually began to think that I was losing my mind. Like, am I going up the wrong path here? Like, have I got this wrong? So then I reached out to a counsellor. I knew I needed counselling, and I was really lucky I struck someone who really knew the dilemma that I was in. And she actually said, you know what, Vicki, you don't even have to do this. You need to think if this is really the journey you want to be on, and how difficult it could be. And, I saw her for a couple of sessions, and I really had to think hard and fast. And it was really difficult, like our marriage being so early in the piece, it really challenged even our relationship. You can imagine I felt very isolated. But the good thing in seeing the counsellor is I knew I was on the right track, so it gave me a little bit of confidence. When I had been to Michael's doctor to see if he could help, the response I'd got from him was that if Michael had a problem, he would come and see him, and that I should just go home and be the good wife. So he chaperoned me out of his office and said, and by the way, I won't charge you for the appointment. Good on you. After the counselling and, the situation I was in, I thought, just need to get this in the open and deal with it. So virtually sat Michael down one afternoon and I just said, look, this is the deal and it's not negotiable. And the things were, he had to go to the GP and go through a process, and we needed to find out what was going on so that we knew what we were dealing with. And secondly, he would have to go to counselling on his own, and then we would have to go to counselling together to redefine our relationship if it was going to work and we were going to go forward. So to his credit, he did those.
And you were quite honest with yourself after his diagnosis about the fact that your life was, to be honest, going to change a lot.
I'd given up work, and you have to let go of stuff. I think, from my observation and, the cohort, we have our own peer and social support group. We've got a network of 140 carer couples, and I've watched many of them struggle because they want to continue life normal and continue to work and not be disrupted. Well, that's just not going to happen. It's unrealistic. So I think the sooner that you can come to terms and, be honest about what's going on and start to address and deal with what's going on and find ways to work in and around it, you'll be much better off. And get educated, absolutely. Knowledge is power. So for me, going to the early programs, understanding dementia, living well with dementia, the more of that you can get a hold of, the better you'll be as well. And we did, like all of Michael's advanced care planning early up, because I have this, been working in palliative care and advanced care planning. I just knew how important that was. And I also knew that I would be the decision maker on Michael's behalf. And I wanted to make sure that if I were making decisions on his behalf, then that they were the things that mattered for him, not for me. Like, I have very different values and ideas about what I want for end of life compared to Michael, and I didn't want that to colour my decision making around what he might want. So that was really important to know about what that was for Michael.
Vicki continued caring for Michael at home for almost 12 years after his diagnosis. Throughout that period, Vicki attended peer support groups like the one you heard at the beginning of this episode. But after more than a decade managing Michael's care, Vicki needed a serious break. So when an opportunity to travel to Europe arose, Vicki had an idea. She wanted to walk the world-famous Camino de Santiago.
I was actually asked to be the bridesmaid for one of my friends. He was getting married to a Portuguese girl. So it was the perfect opportunity to just take some time out. And I love being in a solitary environment, and I find walking very meditative. I started out on the walk, and it was interesting because it's a lot of boardwalk. It's quite slippery early in the morning with the dew and the moisture. And I hadn't realised, but being in Lisbon and Porto beforehand and walking on the big, wide cobblestones, my knees had actually got quite a workout, and I don't have good knees at the best of times. And it was about 3 days in on my walk, and I'm weight bearing with the pack on my back, and I'm starting to really realise I'm struggling with my knees. But I was determined I was going to do it. And I guess in a way that's a bit like the journey with dementia. You have to be prepared for anything along the way.
Absolutely.
And lean in and take things as they come, really, and be creative and find workarounds and lean in and just, do what you can.
And you're also starting to notice a few health issues of your own.
Well, it wasn't until you stopped the caring, like being on the Camino, and then my knees played up. And then I developed this myofascial pain where my whole body started to seize up. And I really feel that's that accumulation of the stress and just being hypervigilant for so long. You're on
autopilot.
Yeah, you are. You're functioning at that level for so long. It's a bit like when your kids are little and you're sleep deprived, and I don't know how you function really, but somehow you do. And it was like that. It really was. So it wasn't until I was in that space that I just realised the impact for myself and the toll it was actually taking on my own health. Not anything obvious, but those subtleties. And honestly, it would take me 2 hours in the morning to actually limber up, and I was on painkillers the whole time, and I just thought, this is not good. I can't keep doing that.
What were you thinking about on that trail?
That's a really good question. I think for me, I was at a point where I realised I was probably at the end of the road with my caring, my preparedness and willingness to keep caring for Michael while supporting him. And I always promised myself that if I ever got to feel resentful about my role of caring, then it would be time to stop. I was starting to think, well, what does the next chapter of my life look like? And Mike had he was in respite care for 7 weeks, which is a big, transition for him too. So that was a kind of test run as to what that might be like for him as well, and for me able to let go and looking beyond my caring role. So as the days passed, really I had lots of time to think about what that might look like, time to get my life back in order, and it was really the perfect time and place to do that.
And how did it sort of feel when you went from him being in temporarily residential care? Talk us through, how did it form a decision that this could be a good time to manoeuvre him into this permanently?
Well, having been away for 7 weeks, that's quite a long period of time, and for Michael to be without seeing me. But in a way, I felt that was part of the plan. Was sometimes if we put people into respite care or care, I see people want to go and visit their loved ones every day. Well, I think there's really no point to that. If you're going to put them in for a respite care, we really need to take the break, right? Yeah. So while I was away, he had a period of respite before that, and I'd kind of had this idea that if I transitioned him slowly, so it was a 2-week period, Then a 5-week period, my sister had actually died that year as well. It was quite an interesting year that year. And one daughter moved to Broome, the other to Canberra, and Michael's mother died. So I had this whole year of letting go.
year.
So part of being on the Camino was also processing the grief and the letting go. So there was a bit more to that story.
What about your self-care plan now? Like, what do you do to make Vicki feel good now?
Yeah, well, after that myofascial pain and realising how debilitating that was, I decided to go on this self-imposed, what I call my radical self-care plan. I started doing yoga, just the subtle stretching and movement, not high gym work and high output stuff, just very gentle yoga exercises. I go to these senior fitness classes because they're cheap. I go swimming once a week on a Sunday. I do 1.5 Ks in the pool and do the sauna. The heat seems to really
Help.
Yeah, exactly. I do my walking still. I've always been good at Buddhist practice, so meditation. My sleep, though, is still something I haven't been able to restore a good sleep pattern. I think all the nights of getting up and down and, de-escalating Mike and just redirecting him and things and his hallucinations, that's taken its toll. So I'd probably sleep 4 hours solid and that's about it. But I seem to function quite well on that, but that's something that I'm still working on.
For people listening, would you offer any advice and tips as a carer of ways to help prevent that burnout?
Find time for yourself. Make use when you've got the support worker or those little opportunities you might get. Not be afraid to ask for help. And when you do ask for help, make sure there's specific requests so people know how they can help you. Otherwise, they just won't ask and won't offer. So certainly looking at who you've got in your network, calling in help when you need it, taking some time for yourself, and finding those things that you really enjoy. Try and find the enjoyment, the things that, you like to do.
What do I do? I've got lots of support groups. I do Days for Girls Sewing, and I've got church groups, and I've got my university group get together.
What do? I belong to a photo club, which meets twice a month.
I always play golf, but I've sort of taken an extra day of golf. And I've got 3 young grandchildren, so I spend a lot of time minding them, taking them to soccer training and just having some fun with them.
So I've got lots of things to do, and coming here is part of that routine, has been for a long time.
And then, like I said before, knowledge is power. So I would say definitely know what you're up for. Don't go blind. You need to know what you're dealing with and how you can manage it. Seek help. There's so much support out there. Dementia Australia, Carers Australia, there's so much help out there in terms of services. But it's definitely your immediate support group. And I can tell you now, without the peer support group that we established, I don't know where I'd be. We've befriended 3 couples, and we regularly went on holidays together. Like, we took the train to Kalgoorlie, we've been down to Esperance, we've been to Albany together, we've swam with the whale sharks in Exmouth together. I mean, it's been amazing. So, and because we get it, it's a really nice way to be in. At the end of the day, we can just sit and relax and have a meal together and a drink and that sort of thing.
And how are you doing now? How are you feeling now? What's the future look like?
I have no idea what's ahead of me, and I guess that's a little bit of the mystery of life. I always say there's a mastery and mystery to life, and I think, mastery, I think I've mastered the journey with dementia pretty well with Mike and I have to say, and we've done a good job together on that journey, and we're in a nice place now where I visit Mike twice a week. And I really connect with Michael on a level I never thought possible in any relationship, and I don't think I would have experienced the level of connection I have with Michael now had we have not journeyed together with dementia. I can't even describe what that's like. It's quite profound. And I never thought I would ever say that, when there was a time when I would have left him possibly.
Yeah, of
so
course.
to get to this stage is, really that pleasant persistence and
It's an
journey with
achievement in
some.
itself,
Yeah, exactly. So that feels really good, and I really look forward to seeing Michael when we visit, and we go out and do things together. Like tonight, we've got the closing event for our Odyssey, our annual art exhibition on Friday. He's going to lunch at the angling club with his mates who they won the premiership 50 years ago footy in Papua New Guinea. So, he's still connected to those guys. So there's still a lot to look forward to. And look, I don't know what the future holds for me. At the moment, I'm working 1 day a week, which is nice to be back in the workforce again. I am looking forward to retirement and taking things easy, but when and what that will look like, I don't know. I just go day to day, and it's a bit like living with dementia. I'm totally in the present moment.
I think that's what you got to do, be in the
Yeah.
present and take each day one day at a time.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Vicki, it's been such a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for coming in and chatting.
Thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure as well.
Thanks again to Vicki for sharing her story with us.
Yeah, I know exactly what Vicki means when she talks about the physical side of things. Caring can take such a big toll on your mind and your emotions, but actually you don't often think about what it does to your body. It's actually often when you outsource some of the physical aspects of caring that you finally feel what it's done to your body.
If you could relate to what Vicki was saying about her experience caring for Michael, or if you want some tips on looking after yourself as a carer, check out our bonus episode about burnout and self-care.
You'll hear from Kristen, who works on Dementia Australia's national helpline. She'll give you simple, practical tips for self-care. And if you want to go a bit deeper, you can always call the helpline yourself.
The helpline's free and available 24/7, every day of the year. Just call 1800 100 500. Hold the Moment is a podcast from Dementia Australia, produced by Dead Set Studios. You can find more episodes and resources on Dementia Australia's website, dementia.org.au. The show is hosted by me, Jim Rogers.
And by me, Hamish McDonald. The executive producers are Kellie Riordan and Gia Moylan. The producers are Madeline Hawcroft and Liam Riordan. Production manager is Ann Chesterman. Sound design by Ryan Pemberton. A special thanks to the whole team at Dementia Australia and to everyone who shared their stories on this podcast.